Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 21 to 27, we will cover today. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any question or query. Recap so far. Through the Quran, we acquire knowledge of the system of Deen and its finer details which aid in understanding Rububiyyat in the universe. Wahi was sent to mankind through the medium of the messengers of Allah, all of whom were human beings. The universe was created in 6 stages, and the earth was made suitable for the sustenance of man who possesses choice and intent. This is an important point to keep it in mind as Momin, as the students of the Quran, that whole of this universe has gone through a very long phase, long time, for making it suitable for the arrival of mankind. And we have made a decision to come to the Quran and try to follow its values. So that gives us significance of our own self. The law of requital was put in place so that each and every deed of man manifests its outcome. Time was created through the alternation of day and night to make man aware of his finite physical existence in this world. Mankind is one brotherhood, and the aim of the Quran is to bring all humanity together after removing their differences so that fear and grief disappears from the human world. While treading on the path of Deen, results take time to manifest their outcomes, hence there is a need to remain steadfast and display patience. Quran says that nothing in the universe, that is in human world, in terms of human actions, goes unnoticed. It is bound to produce its outcome. So if we are doing good deeds, then these results are showing up, but they are not visible at this point in time in a concrete form. And this aspect will be partially addressed today. Human potentials, a question of giving opportunity. Over here, I have drawn 3 schematics just to highlight a particular point, which I will explain as I go along. We are born with certain potentials, and many become manifested in a non-Quranic system selectively. For example, through education, training, job experience, marriage, social interaction, all these potentials are displayed as a result of following relative values of the society in which we are brought up. So all of us are in our own capacity, wherever we are displaying certain potentials even without coming to the Quran. So this is the point I'm trying to make over here. Children who do not get these opportunities are unable to display these potentials related to the man-devised system. So if there is no school near a village, then the children of that village will not get education and will be deprived of those benefits which are available to some of the children in the man-made system. So this is something which we should keep it in mind. The self which emerges under relative values cannot meet the requirements of the system of Deen, whether in this life or the life of the hereafter. The self which emerges and operates in a man-devised system cannot get rid of the chains imposed by these systems. And what I've done over here is I've listed some of the chains which we see around the necks of people. Religious beliefs, political beliefs. For example, people associate themselves with a certain party system or certain parties. Race, gender, culture and traditions, nationalism, social norms, egocentrism, own interest, power, status, biases, prejudices. So all these are chains which human beings are carrying around in their heads all the time. And depending on how many they have, the more burdened they are. So the point over here is that Quran wants us to get rid of all of this and come to just one model, one value system, and a set of divine attributes. People follow man-made laws and thus live life which is assumed to end with death. So with all these burdens, there is no way human beings can think of the life of the hereafter or think of a higher purpose of life. Next slide is the same human consciousness which deals with the man-devised systems also possesses all the potentials which the Quran has declared to be present in man by virtue of being karam by Allah. We remember Quran says, "Laqad karamna bani Adama." Hence, we have the potentials to deal deal with all situations in the human world. The potentials which we use in the man-devised world are manifested in front of our eyes. Just look at the most successful people and their trajectory from beginning till death. How much is their effort and how much do they get without effort? For example, they get it from parents, they get it from society, they get it from environment, by birth, etc. For example, if somebody is born in a rich family, then the lottery of having rich parents, he or she will get a higher head start in a man-devised system. The potentials related to divine attributes plus permanent values can be acquired by all of us, but we have to come to the Quran for that. How do these change the human world? Not providing opportunities to exhibit these potentials in the world is a gross injustice. And that is the point we need to keep it in mind, because if all the potentials which are related to being karam are kept within us, which we utilize in a man-devised system, imagine how much more will come out of our self if we have a system of Deen. And we have already seen the change which is taking place within us because of coming to the Quran. So that is the point I'm trying to make through these three schematics. Now let us go to the first verse for today, tendency to desire quick results. وَإِذَا أَذَقْنَا النَّاسَ رَحْمَةً مِّن بَعْدِ ضَرَّاءَ مَسَّتْهُمْ إِذَا لَهُم مَّكْرٌ فِي آيَاتِنَا قُلِ اللَّهُ أَسْرَعُ مَكْرًا إِنَّ رُسُلَنَا يَكْتُبُونَ مَا تَمْكُرُونَ. But these people will not wait that long, because human beings want quick results. And over here, the Quran is saying that, but these people will not wait that long. If we link it with the previous verses, then this will become clear. The hastiness of man is such that when he faces the slightest trouble, he starts to wail and scream and call out to us. But when, contrary to this, he obtains comfort, then he starts to devise all kinds of tricks in order to turn his back towards our laws. Because human beings are they very quickly forget as well. So that is the point which Quran is making over here, that you should remain highly aware of what you are doing and the way you are living your life. Say to them that the law of Allah also happens to be swifter in planning than you. For this purpose, his established forces keep recording every trick of yours. Hence, your trickeries are before Allah and cannot go outside of his group. So our awareness level goes far higher when we are all the time aware of the operation or functioning of the law of requital. Let us look at in more detail some of the points covered in this verse. The Quran helps to overcome the tendency for quick results. If we recall, it was stated in verse 10:20 that results take time to manifest. However, those who do not follow the guidance of Allah become impulsive and want to hasten everything in their life. In Allah's domain, results have to pass through the stated time of respite, but once these start to manifest, then there is no going back. Understanding the laws of Allah helps us to acquire patience and perseverance, which helps in making sense of the world and our life in it. Next point is, here 2 points are explained about the human psyche. Firstly, man starts to become very unhappy when faced with some difficulty and resorts to supplications to Allah. However, when this issue becomes resolved, then he does not examine his problems in order to understand these in more detail. And some of the people at times say that because of my prayers, this thing has happened, without realizing that there is a law functioning in our life. And if we are in a man-made system, we should try to understand that how this man-made system functions and how the things get resolved through our efforts and by using our intellect and reasoning. Secondly, in some cases, he even tries to transgress Allah's laws and as a consequence thinks that nothing will happen to him. Here the Quran reiterates the functioning of the law of requital. Next verse is, knowledge of the working of the laws provides stability in our outlook. I will not go through the verse, and we can have a look in any copy of the Quran, and I'll go through the meanings. If you wish to witness this hastiness and impulsiveness of people, observe it during their condition when traveling. Their journey is on both land and sea. When they board the boat and the wind is favorable, then they are very pleased. But when an opposing wind is fierce and gusty and engulfs them, and the stormy waves of the ocean rise up from all directions, and they think that they are overwhelmed by destruction, then they start to beseech Allah as though they are the only ones who are sincerely devoted in obeying His commands and laws. And this kind of information we read in the newspapers as well, that if an aeroplane gets into some kind of a trouble, then people over there, many of them, they start praying to God, whatever concept of God they have, and implore profusely before Him that if we are given salvation from this horde of demons, then we will be grateful to you forevermore. Because when we are in trouble, we feel very vulnerable. And when human beings are very vulnerable, they try to hold on to every straw which is available to them. But then they forget. They don't look into the problem in more detail and say that, what about those who are already in trouble, who are already living off the heap of rubbish in, for example, Africa, India, Pakistan, and in poorer countries. And now we can see homelessness even in the Western world. So we should look at it from their point of view and think that why are they in that state in the first place? How do we interpret events in our life? First is, in this verse, an example is taken from daily life of that time when people used to travel on boats with sails. With the arrival of strong adverse winds, they felt threatened, and when man is under threat of mortal danger, he prays to Allah or whatever deities he has to save him and promises to mend his ways in life. Human beings do recall their past life when they see signs of impending death in front of them. And there are books on this, as well as there are some YouTube videos as well, that when people are nearing death, or for example, they are suffering from a terminal illness, whole of their past comes before them. And the Quran is pointing over here is that death is a fact of life, and the respite which Allah has put in our life, that is before death, we should make use of it optimally. Here the Quran has added that they promise to become righteous and do good deeds if they get another chance and manage to escape this perilous situation. The Quran has noted over here, Davullaha mukhlisina lahud deena, i.e. follow the deen of Allah, that is His laws. It is a big commitment. So Momin, those who come to the Quran, they are always keeping the laws of Allah before them so that they don't go wrong. To make it even more forceful, he fervently adds that he will be among those who do shukr, that is, they will utilize their abilities for the good of mankind, i.e. utilize their potentials in the path of Allah, not just saying words of shukr Allah after the end of every meal or getting some kind of extra money. Shukr over here, Quran means is that we should utilize our abilities, our earnings, our potentials for the good of others. What is noted here can only be from Allah, as He knows the deepest secret feelings and sentiments of human beings under all circumstances of human life. It is well established now psychologically that under life-threatening circumstances, man remembers his past life and his deeds. Let us look at the next verse, 1023, relating to our life's events in the Quran. فَلَمَّا أَنْجَاهُمْ إِذَا هُمْ يَبْغُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ إِنَّمَا بَغْيُكُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ مَتَاعَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا ثُمَّ عَلَيْنَا مَرْجِعُكُمْ فَنُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. But when they obtain protection from this trouble, then Allah and His commands are all forgotten. So this verse is linked with the previous one, and they begin to spread rebelliousness and fasad without any reason or justification in the land, that is without haqq. We know haqq means to produce constructive results. So if our actions lead to destructive results or negative outcomes in the outer world, then we are following Iblis and Shaitan. O Rasool, proclaim to mankind that if you adopt transgression and rebelliousness against the laws of Allah, then in reality this will be rebelliousness against your own self. From this, you will obtain some benefits of physical life, but life is not just the life of your physical body. The real life is the life of humanity, that is the life of human self, which interacts with other human beings at self's level, not only physically, but at the thought level. for which there are established separate laws from our direction. The outcome of every deed of yours is according to these laws. Ultimately, the collective outcome of all these will appear before you. Further reflections on this verse 1023, time is a resource which needs to be valued. But when humans emerge from any trouble and achieve a degree of prosperity, they tend to forget that they ever faced any danger. The Quran here draws our attention to not have this kind of psyche, as this leads to forgetting the higher purpose of life. Being forgetful about the higher purpose of life means that we start to follow our unguided desires and gradually move far away from any possibility of coming to the path of the Quran. So it's important that we utilize our memory. And if we do not have a good memory, then we need to jot it down somewhere. Even put an alarm to do some, for example, if we intend doing some Saleh deed, then we should not forget it. We should keep it in our memory, because that is how our self develops. And we should carry it out even if there are some obstructions, because once we have committed to something within our own thought process, then essentially Allah is aware of it and we have made a promise and we should fulfill that promise. Because as Nietzsche said, that the difference between animals and human beings is that human beings make a commitment. They can make an agreement. An agreement must be fulfilled, or there should be a genuine reason for not being able to do that. And with whom we have made an agreement, we should also explain to the other side. Because if my actions create an unhappiness in the mind of somebody else, then it has serious consequences for me. Here, Allah has drawn our attention to a very important aspect of our psyche, i.e., we have certain potentials which, if we do not use them positively or do not use them at all, then essentially we waste valuable time in our life, which should have been utilized in pursuit of good. And that is important, that have we done enough good before the end comes very close and it's the time to leave this world? Because the more good we do, for which we have the potentials, then it will take our self to a higher eminent level. The Quran terms it as contributing to disorder in the world, because we had the ability to do good, but we did not do this, and either we did nothing or instead conformed to those who were creating imbalances in the world. So we should become very aware of the thought process which goes through our head when we have to do something, when we have to fulfill an agreement, when we have to think hard that why there are so many issues in the world. And we should make an effort to understand and go to the bottom of it, because those efforts pay up and those help increase the understanding of ourselves. Because if we do not understand the world around us, then essentially we don't know what a better world can be. 1023, understanding the dynamics of our life. By emphasizing the reality of physical life, that is mata al-hayat dunya, and this has come in this verse, take this life as a transitory stage, as a journey, and live life like that there is a temporariness in this physical world. Our attention is drawn to this fact that days turn into nights and nights turn into days, and we keep aging. And I put down a comment over here, one birthday is equal to one circle around the sun. If we start to assume that this is all there is to our life, then essentially we have failed to use our cognitive potentials for the larger good. The point over here is, which Quran is drawing our attention, that you have tremendous potentials. We have tremendous potentials, and we should question ourselves that have I discovered all of those potentials or not within the means or resources available to us. This is something to which the Quran has asked us to reflect repeatedly. For example, Quran says, Alamu annamal hayatu dunya laibun wa lahun wa zinatun tafakhurun bainakum wa takasurun fil amwali wal awlade. That know that, Alamu, know this, that this life of yours, do not take it as just sport and amusement, and just for adornments and attractions which will take you away from the pure higher purpose of life. And do not get into the race of takasurun fil amwali wal awlade, and think that the success is in terms of accumulating more wealth, and just having children and their successes. Of course, all these things need balance in our life, and we have to, because these are important as well, because it is through the use of theirs within the permanent values which gives us a better self, a higher self. If our life follows this pattern, then we live life assuming it will end with death. If our balance is tilted towards these priorities, which non-Quranic people follow, then obviously we have lost the balance in our own life. The summing up towards the end of the verse is amazingly precise and accurate. The Quran says, Summa ilayna marji'ukum fanunabbi'ukum bima kuntum ta'malun. That remember that all of you are being pursued by the law of requital. Over here is marji'ukum, that you are coming back. Fanunabbi'ukum, then we will let you know bima kuntum ta'malun, what exactly you have been doing in your life. But this is the view for those who do not think that they are accountable. Since we have come to the Quran and we are studying the Quran and we know we are accountable, so this verse is in fact not applicable to us, and I'll explain next. After living our life here, we will find out every minute detail of our own conduct. Because we are already aware of what we are doing, we are also aware of where we were, where we are, and where we are heading. Here, Momineen are briefed beautifully not to worry. All is being taken care of through the process of human accountability. So we know where we are in terms of our own eminence and our own loftiness. There will be no need to tell you about your conduct. You will arrive here fully cognizant of the state of yourself. So Quran is, because this verse is addressed to us, to know other people who are not on this path, or to explain to them. So in our case, you will have bil akhiratihum yuqinun. We will know that what we have done. So we will not be told over there in the life of the hereafter that what exactly you did, because we will already know what exactly we did, the way we lived our life. And a very important point, this is a very refined way of interpreting this verse. 10:24, science and the physical world help to develop intellect. I will not go through this long verse, but I'll go through the meanings. Think of the simile of this word, that is the physical life, as being like that of us, that is Allah sending down rain from the clouds, and by combining it with the fertility of the land, which serves as food for mankind and fodder for livestock, grew, blossomed, and the state of its pleasantness and blossoming became such. And this is about the greenery and crops in the field, as if the earth was wearing garlands of multicolored flowers, a beautiful language used here by the Quran, and has become a bride with adornments and decorations. And the owners of the land thought that the whole produce of crops has now fallen into our control. And this is very important, that people do feel happy if they own a certain number of acres of land, and they feel very happy when they look at the crops, even if somebody else has tilled it for them. And in the meantime, during a part of the night or day, our law took one turn, and as a result of this, the waving crops became like mown fields, as if there was no sign of them here yesterday. So the Quran has pointed to the system which we are following under the man-devised laws, that where if something goes wrong, then we lose everything. Through these kinds of examples, we make our laws clear, but only those people can benefit from these who make use of their intellect and reasoning. We will reflect on this a bit more. Failing to notice order and harmony in the outer world is a failure of the human intellect. If we cannot understand the world, our own world, despite having order, witnessing order in the outer world, in the universe, the way, for example, galaxies are working, the way sun and moon are working, then our intellect has failed to draw our attention to higher values of ourself, which we can attain and then get a better life. The Quran has used examples from our life on planet Earth, and here our attention is drawn towards agriculture, which is supported by the hydrological cycle of providing rainwater for the growth of crops. Wherever a command is given or a permanent value is noted, the Quran also explains the reason for it, and it calls it hikmat. That is why it is given. For example, in relation to a fasting, Quran says, la'allakum tattaqoon, so that you become muttaqi. And then muttaqi is defined in verse 2, 177. Here it states that do not consider that your life here has no consequences. If you think there is nothing more to life than to eat, drink, and hoard by taking away from the needy, then remember you are not far away from the grip of Allah's law of requital. Here the example used is that of the ruining of crops in such a way as if these never existed in the first place in the farmland. So Quran is drawing our attention metaphorically as well that the way all these things are mata'ul hayat dunya, they are temporary, they are for going through this physical life and then die. And if we haven't made use of this value system which Allah has given, then we don't have a self which can be of any value in the life of the hereafter. We can expand this to the highly uncertain systems of life we have created in the world, which generate fear and anxiety in the life of everyone. Just note the conclusion of the verse where it states, كَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. These signs are explained so that whoever reflects on these will be able to comprehend the finer aspects of the human psyche and life. Whenever we go through the Quran, we should look at the finer aspects by linking all the verses and seeing that do these fit into the overall context of the system of Deen. 10:25, Allah created man and showed the path of guidance, security, and peace implicit in this guidance. Wallahu yad'u ila daris salame wa yahdi man yasha'u ila siratim mustaqim. Hence, those people who make worldly benefits alone as being the aim of their life and do not concern themselves with the future, their path results in temporary adornments and amusements, but ultimately is the cause for perdition. Contrary to this kind of thinking or this kind of an outlook is that path of life towards which Allah invites. Wallahu yad'u ila daris salamin. Its outcome is security from every kind of devastation and protection from every kind of destruction. This is that balanced path of successes towards which the law of Allah guides each one of those people who wishes to seek guidance from it. I've gone through slightly more detail of this verse. Further reflection, there are three parts of this verse. Firstly, Allah, i.e. with all his attributes. We know that when Rabb is used, it is in reference to Rububiyat. But over here, Allah says that He is inviting, which means that all his attributes are applicable over here. And those who are working on his behalf, they should understand all these attributes and manifest as many as possible through their self. Invites mankind towards the abode of peace and security. This means that all other ways of life will not provide us with peace and security. Can we find evidence for this statement in the world around us? Yes, we can see plenty of lack of peace and anxiety and sorrows and grief in the world. Just look at all the chaos, conflicts, wars, fear, anxieties, and uncertainties, etc., prevalent in the world of today. Behind each, there is an invitation to the system of Iblis. This is where we need to use our potential of deep reflection and reasoning. Let us go to the second point. Secondly, it states that guidance toward this abode of security and peace is based on the Mashiach of Allah, i.e. knowing his laws and then taking advantage of these laws within the time of respite in this life before physical death severs our contact with this world. And thirdly, this guidance is to take us to the Sirat-e-Mustaqim, the path which is not only straight, and it is the shortest path to success in life, but provides balance and strength as we keep treading on it. Difference between translation and meaning. Over here, what came to my mind was that this is a short verse, but it is good to illustrate this point that translation and meaning, how do these differ? For example, the translation of this verse by Abdullah Yusuf Ali is, and Allah invites to the home of peace and guides whom he wills to a straight path. And if we read this translation, of course, it is saying what is noted in the verse apparently, but it will not take us to that deep understanding with which we can change ourselves. So that is important to understand that when we are studying the Quran, we have to go through it cognitively so that it brings change within us in our understanding. Now let us expand its meaning in light of the system of Deen. I've already noted 3 points, but over here I have added some more. The verse is addressed to Momin, So it looks as if Allah is saying, but actually it is Momin who have to say to others after understanding it, because we are the ones who are representing Allah as far as duties are concerned on this earth. The verse is addressed to Momin to act on this direction from Allah with all of his attributes. Hence, here it will mean that Momin, after understanding Islam, that is, a cognitive change has already taken place, invite mankind to this system which provides security and peace and frees them from the fear and huzn in which they will always live without the system of Deen. So our voice, our intellect, our motivation, our enthusiasm will be added to this. So these words will then get added life. So that is the way we should look at it. And those things cannot come unless we understand the way Quran is asking us to understand its message. All this is in accordance with the laws of Allah, that is Mashiat. It is not that Allah just wills at random. No, it all follows his laws. And unless we understand his laws as Momineen, we cannot make others understand. As explained in the Quran, and this guidance is available according to these laws. As a consequence of obeying the Quran, they will get onto the path called Sirat Mustaqim, which is straight, precise, and established, and will guide mankind by providing evidence which can be checked in the light of the Quranic value system. Because over here, the way translation is, he wills to a straight path. It doesn't make sense. Just straight path. What about the other paths? So this has to be differentiated, that Sirat Mustaqim is not just straight and the shortest path, but it is an established path and it gives us balance. All of this needs a revolutionary cognitive change, and this is that inner change to which Allah invites those who have become Momineen after accepting Eimaan, as they understand that Inna Allaha la yugayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yugayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Because we have to keep always in mind that nothing changes in the human world until we change what is within our own selves. And after that change, then we act on it within the values of the Quran. Discovering precise scaling is part of understanding human psyche. And here we come to a very interesting verse of the Quran. Lillazina asanul husna wa ziyadatun wala yarhaqu wujuhahum qatarun wala zillatun ulaika ashabul jannati hum fiha khalidun. The outcome of those people who, after adopting this path, live a balanced and harmonious life is not only that their own life becomes beautiful, rather far greater than this is that their society also remains secure and protected from the agonizing azab of humiliation and disgrace, and becomes converted into such a Jannat which is never visited by autumn. That is, it never suffers from any decay. And this is based on evidence. And we will look into some of these points in more detail. Further reflections. This verse has three interconnected parts which need our profound attention. Firstly, a permanent value stated that if we do balanced deeds which create balance in society and enhance our understanding and help develop ourselves, that is called husn, then this leads to enhancing beauty, tangibly visible and cognitively recognized. So husn does not mean in the outer world only, but it also means has it brought husn within our own thinking as well. And that is something which is very important to take from this verse, wherever its effects are felt. This then does not remain in one state, but expands and multiplies in all directions. Waziyadatun, i.e., whoever inquires the pleasure of doing this, it takes them to a higher eminence and loftiness in life. Secondly, when balance starts to take shape within a society, then it gradually becomes contagious and others join in as well. And as a consequence, the negative effects of batil start to disappear. Since the universe is created as haq, hence it helps to promote haq. This is its duty. So this is the duty of the universe. The cosmic forces around us, which are invisible, are meant to support haq wherever it is. And of course, it has to come through human hands, and human beings who are not happy with the state of affairs in the human world, then they get attracted when they use their rational side and their reasoning. Now, continuing the same, thirdly, these people through their developed selves become the owners of that elevated and eminent self which defines each one of them. Since this is what they are, that is Ashabul Jannah. So they start owning Jannah. That Jannah is their eminent and lofty self. Hence, this self of theirs will only expand further in direct proportion to their desire and efforts to grow. But one thing is definite, that this self cannot lose its vitality and is in the path of Sirat-e-Mustaqim for eternity. Because the pleasure which we get by following this path and the change which occurs within us and the change which we understand and we accept and we have a firm conviction, then takes us higher and higher. We don't give it up. We might slow down at some point in time, but that doesn't mean we are going to give it up. Here too, we can see that the translation of verse 1026 will not leave any lasting impact on our thinking and will not provoke that depth of thought which helps us to alter our outlook. So this is a good opportunity that we should go back to the Quranic copies which we have with translations and then compare it with them and then see that how much we are able to expand cognitively and see that how it affects our own self. However, when we analyze it critically in light of the duties of Jamaat-e-Momineen, then it expands in all directions. Whatever is in the Quran needs our focus, and we need to figure out the change which is required cognitively to change the world starting from our individual self. Because once we understand cognitively that what change it brought within us, then we are able to explain to others. It is not an emotive issue or solely intellectual issue. It is a whole reality. That is, we have to bring into use both our intellect and our heart, our emotions, to explain it to others that this is how our self develops. This is how it acquires higher eminence. And one of the evidences is that we can understand the Quran far better than the way we understood previously. 1026, reflecting on latent potentials. Here we need to reflect on a few important points in relation to the development of ourself. Just like the potentials of a seed, which can turn it into a fruit tree, those potentials which are kept within us at the time of our creation, if provided opportunities within the correct environment to a child, then these can help them become Momineen and Mominat, who then carry out the duties which Allah has taken on himself in relation to the human world. Because whole issue is that the Quran is asking that somehow the importance of our own self should get into our head, should get into ourself, that we start thinking that what is given to me is extremely important and it has the capacity to develop and discover its own potentials. However, if the system of Deen is not in place, then this puts added responsibility on pioneers like us to develop our own self first, then come together and grow together through Eimaan and Saleh deeds. We have a far higher challenge because we don't have a physical environment around us. But then those of us who are in a slightly better position of convenience within the man-made or man-devised system, then we can develop ourselves cognitively by coming, of course, we have come together and then discussing it and then paying more attention to finer details which are coming out of these verses which we are sharing together. During this period, who become interested, carry this out. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكَتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. We have to acquire knowledge first of the book of Allah, then use that why it is given to us and what are the intricacies of what we are learning and how to apply it. But yuzakkihim, by developing our own self first, then we pass it on to others. At least within the families, we can pass it on to our children and make them understand so that they, maybe during their lifetime, things might start changing. Through this, discover their own potentials, which include manifestation of divine attributes, plus understanding the role of the permanent values in the world. Come to grips with the outline of the system of Deen and stay together by removing all differences. Because these differences, which if we fail to remove in the light of the Quran, then we are going to die with those differences, and that will affect our life in the hereafter. And that is the point we need to understand, that removal of these differences means that we go to the next life with zero burden in our heads. We exactly know that we have done our best and we do not have any burden, any cognitive burden within our heads. We are totally free from that, all chains, all man-made chains. We will witness that more and more of our latent potentials will keep on emerging. Let us go to the last verse for this presentation, 1027. Self is affected by wrong deeds. وَالَّذِينَ كَسَبُوا السَّيِّئَاتِ جَزَاءُ السَّيِّئَاتٍ بِمِثْلِهَا وَتَرْهَقُهُمْ ذِلَّةٌ مَا لَهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ عَاصِمٍ كَأَنَّمَا أَغْشِيَتْ وُجُوهُهُمْ قِطْعًا مِّنَ اللَّيْلِ مُظْلِمًا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. We look at the meanings. Contrary to this, regarding those people who adopt the path of creating imbalances, those same types of imbalances become created within their own selves. A great reality expressed over here, and we will go through these details when the Quran says that who adopt the path of creating imbalances, those same types of imbalances become created within their own selves. And in this way, their balance becomes distorted and their society also becomes humiliated and blackened. No one can save them from this humiliating punishment which transpires as a consequence of the law of Allah. The state of their darkness is as if someone has taken a piece of the darkness of night and thrown it as a veil over their faces. This is a beautiful part of the verse. Only Quran could use it. Their society is hellish, in which they live for all times. Those who fail to acquire a Momin self. Those human beings who enact wrong deeds reap the equivalence of their deeds, i.e., the effect of their self is in direct proportion to the thoughts which they had in carrying out those deeds. These deeds, while affecting their own selves, also created imbalances in the society in which they reside, and these effects show their impact in the world around them. So whatever is wrong happening in this world and whatever good, of course, we should always look at the thought process behind doing this wrong. If the system of Iblis is very clever in projecting falsehood covered with some kind of a veil of truth over that, we should try to look behind it. And that is something to which Quran draws our attention repeatedly. There is another important point which requires our attention in relation to the world around us. The world around us is full of chaos and conflicts, and we witness this on a daily basis. If we cannot perceive this due to being beneficiaries of the system, then we are literally blind according to the Quran, and the verdict of the Quran is, وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى فَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ أَعْمَى. That one who is blind in this world, that is, who failed to use the rational side of his mind and reasoning, then he stays blind. Because essentially, he is not going to, he or she is not going to develop their self, because they are not even aware of having a self. They thought that the life is merely getting up in the morning and then going to sleep in the evening, and it doesn't matter what they do as long as they are not caught. The one who is blind here will be blind in the hereafter. Despite the availability of light, they make a choice to cover their intellect and reasoning with a piece of darkness taken from the night. The consequence is that they become owners of fire. So just like Ashabul Jannah, who own Jannat, that is, the Jannat becomes part of their self. Over here, the Quran says fire becomes the part of their self. The fire of failure, the fire of frustration, the fire of fear and grief, and fire of losing everything when they reach up the hereafter. They possess a self which can never grow, and hence all their potentials go wasted forever. The Quran is not trying to scare us or frighten us, because La ikraha fi Deen says that we have to differentiate, we have to make a distinction between what is the right path and what is the wrong path. So it is not Quran is trying to scare us. The only thing is that the Quran is putting facts before us from the position of knowledge of the hereafter and the purpose of our creation. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. And over here, Quran has very clearly said that who reject and who falsify it and deny it. That is, so many signs are around us. We can't count those signs. There are signs of Allah everywhere, in the outer world as well as within us. They are Ashabul Jahim because they make a decision that they don't want to develop their self further. Jahim means that self which is in a position of status quo. It has failed to go forward. It hasn't availed of all those potentials which were kept within him as a consequence of being karam. They haven't utilized those. No further growth possible as they do not want it. And over here, when we say do not want it, these thoughts also come to our mind. What about those who are not informed? Then the question we should ask is that what is stopping us from informing them? Have we done our bit? Because we develop ourselves by informing others. So then we should make an effort to pass it on to others. We should spend resources to make it possible to pass it on to others. If we don't put in our best, we do not put resources, then how do we expect the things to go across the world to all corners of the world? How are we going to pass it on to them? So that is the important question which we should ask. Finally, some more reflections on verses 10, 26-27. Here I've tried to bring these two verses together because in the first, in the verse 26, Quran has talked about the balanced deeds and how these go, how these multiply. And then in the second one, Quran says that evil has one scale and evil has an equivalent effect on ourselves. Whereas when we do good, it has a more multiplied effect on ourselves depending on the scale of the deed which we do. In verse 10:26, the Quran has noted lillazina asanul husna wa ziyadatun, i.e. for the conduct which leads to balanced outcomes not only reaps the equivalence of its reward but greater than the input. And over here there is an example given from the physical world by the Quran. However, the Quran has linked this to striving in the path of Allah, stating matalul lazina yunfikuna amwalahum fi sabilillah, and that is very important, fi sabilillah. And we think that Tolu Islam is working for this cause. Kamatale habbatin ambatat sab'a snabila fi kulle sumbulatin me'atun habbatin. The example of those who make available their possessions in the path of Allah is like a seed which has 7 spikes. Each spike has 100 grains. And we see the example of this in terms of fruit trees. For example, we put in one fruit tree, and for years and years it keeps giving fruit in thousands. And the Quran has put these examples in a number of places, that you put in one seed and then see what Allah's law does to it. And similarly, it draws the comparison with our deeds as well, that if we do righteous deeds, these also get multiplied. Saleh deeds give a higher return than the effort put in. For example, we can look at verse 50-36, where Quran has said, Wala daina mazid, because there are two effects. There's a physical reward, which we can see. We can see a fruit tree, we can see our crops multiplying, and the reward related to the development of the self, leading towards Deen. And here there is a very finer point which Quran is pointing to, that if you come together and make your efforts jointly together, you will see that gradually these will start bearing results just like a fruit tree. This gives us a higher deed to reward ratio of 1 to 700. I've just quoted this example in a tangible form from this verse. In verse 10:27, it is noted that the equivalence of a wrong deed is equal to the scale of that deed as per the law. Of course, it also has two effects, an effect in the physical domain and an effect on the human self. The ratio will be 1 to 1. If we look at the world around us, since there is so much chaos and disorder, this means that batil is very high despite being on a lower scale of spread, because most human beings are on the wrong path and thus contributing to batil. The point which I'm trying to make over here out of these two verses is that if we see the world around us and without check, if all of these people who are not on the right path, who are not on Sirat-e-Mustaqim, if they are doing wrong deeds, these wrong deeds are on a lower scale, but just because sheer numbers, these will keep spreading. And this is visible right before our eyes. That world is going towards more wrong as the time is passing. And of course, unless human beings stop, think, and go back and say, we will not do it anymore, we don't accept it anymore, things will not change. This includes those who stay neutral. Staying neutral is equivalent to supporting batil, because If I have the potentials to do something good and I do not do it, and instead I stay neutral, that means my potentials haven't been manifested. As we do not use our latent potentials to stand up for haqq, and this goes against us, as the Quran calls it, zulm, because we then promote injustice in the world. With that, I come to the end of this presentation. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. And please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. And we should remember that when we share it, we also help develop our own self.